Looks like we're live, right?
Yep. All right, we're live.
Looks like we're live, right?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Tanya Sawicki. I'm one of the members of our Friends Board, and along with some of our other Friends members, we'd like to welcome you to the first edition of our online Pastries with the Principals, which is in the afternoon and with no pastries, but possibly a cafe clutch. So either your coffee or your cocktails, whichever you prefer. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to start by just letting you know how the session is going to work today. We will be kind of going as we usually do with our pastries. Our principals are there. So we have Principal Truckus and Principal Bowders, as well as Director David Sharetta, who will go over some main points and things that they would like to review with you. As you may have seen, we also had given the opportunity for our participants to submit some questions online, and we've taken those and submitted those also to our principals and director, and they will be answering those questions as well. And lastly, we have an opportunity for you all to ask us some live questions. We do ask that you keep in mind and listen to the questions that might have been prepared already and answered, that we can really make a productive session for this hour. Again, any questions that you have that maybe did not come up in those previously selected, please go ahead and type those in the Zoom web chat Q&A session, and we will be taking those as we go. We have about 60 minutes for this session allotted, so we would also like to make sure that you keep that in mind with our principals, of course, and our director wanting to give us the most information possible. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Sharetta. So David, would you like to go ahead and take over?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everyone, for joining us wherever you are. I know we're all apart, but the Einstein community has been tremendously united in the last, it's been 6 weeks or so, and it's really, it feels like years since we've all been together. But I want to thank everybody for coming out to this inaugural session of Pastries with the Principals, or whatever you happen to have in your cup right now. I swear mine is coffee, so I'm on the school campus. I wanted to just give a couple overview items before we delve into specifics, and some highlights as we usually do in the regular pastry sessions. From a staff end, we've really taken a two-pronged approach to trying to manage this unprecedented situation that we're in globally. One part of that is to take care of our people, and by our people, it's our staff, it's our students, it's our parents, it's our communities around both of our campuses, and then the greater San Diego community. San Diego County, it was just announced, has just under 25% unemployment rate. So out of every 4 people you see walking down the street of employment age, 1 of them is unemployed, and that's likely to increase. And so we realize that taking care of people and their needs is really, really critical. To that end, due to incredible generosity of people within our community and also outside of our community, we raised about $16,000 for a COVID relief fund that's been helping us put together food boxes on weekends that will continue up through June. We've also distributed, by the end of this week, we'll be at about 25,000 meals, which is pretty remarkable. We were classified really early on as a community food distribution center, so we were actually able to distribute breakfast and lunch to anyone 18 years of age and younger. And we've been doing that consistently with the help of volunteers and really logistically setting that up so we have social distancing, but we want to keep our people close and keep our hearts connected, even if we have to stay 6 feet apart. And then there's the academic end, and I think we're pretty proactive in trying to anticipate this right even the week before the decision to close on the 13th of March. And we were able to already start training staff in some of these tools that now have become really commonplace, Zoom and Google Classroom, and some of the other tools, Screencastify, and some of the things that as parents you're exposed to now every day. And we were able to get that going even before spring break. And over spring break, the principals and I and teacher leaders really worked hard on the AEA distance learning plan. And so, we had a real push to have that come out right after spring break. And so now we've had over 2 weeks of traction with that plan in place. And it's not perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect plan. But if there ever was a living document, this is one. We realized that 120 years of education came to a screeching halt and had to do a hard right turn in a matter of a month. And, typically professions take forever to turn the big aircraft carrier. And we just had to turn the aircraft carrier into a speedboat because out of necessity. And so we know that there are adjustments that need to be made. I know some of the questions that we fielded in advance have to do with some of the adjustments to the plan. But from a global perspective, I feel really good and proud of the AEA team, from the staff end, from the parent support end, from the community, those who were able to contribute time, energy, expertise, funds have done so, and this will continue. Just looking up here, we've distributed just under 500 laptops so far, about 50% to actually over 50% of those have been to the elementary campus. As I said, going on 25,000 meals. And so we've really tried to also not only hand out technology and say, go home and log on, but provide an avenue so that parents could log on or could contact us rather with tech issues. And so Brad and his team have been fielding, I went dark. Have been fielding tech questions from parents who are just wondering, how do I do this? How do I turn this on? How do I log in? So we're supporting, our tech support expanded out from staff and students to now families as well. So feel good about that going forward. I'm going to start with some of the global questions, and then the principals are going to weigh in with some of the ones that are more specific to the schools. I'm just reading here from my screen. Question number one was, I think my biggest question is, will the school close for the rest of the year? So the concept of school closing is an interesting one. And you'll notice that our last announcement that we came out with intentionally did not say we are closed up through June 20, whatever. And there's a reason for that. We don't want the understanding to be that school is closed. School's not closed. School as we know it, as we knew it, is closed. But learning is still continuing. And so, if you listen to the governor, we won't be back in classrooms before the end of June, but school's not closed. School is in session going forward. And most of the school districts, although there's some exceptions, have not come out with a hard, we're closed indefinitely, or rather we're closed through this certain date. They just say, you know what, we're in a different reality and we're moving forward. And I think that's more appropriate also given when Governor Newsom was talking about this question of, well, we're considering at the state level opening the school year early, mid-July, for example, and how he's kind of floating that question with educators in Sacramento. This paradigm has completely shifted. Does that mean we'll all be marching into classrooms in mid-July with 30 kids in a classroom with one teacher? If you listen to the governor, the answer is no. But will there be a scenario in which at some point there's a transition with a blend between face-to-face and online with the ability to adapt really quickly to changing circumstances? I'd say that time will come. The governor has said it's weeks, not months. So he's pretty wise in the way he speaks. It could be 3 weeks or it could be 8 weeks, right? But we're just waiting to see. And I really respect the leadership from the state level because it's basing itself as much as possible on data and on science rather than political pressure. We all want to resume our lives and go down to the store in our neighborhood and support our local merchants and ourselves get back to work and see our kids again in classrooms, but not until it's safe. There's also a question. I realize it's a long way off and nothing likely has been decided so far, but what will next year look like? what possibilities is admin considering? If you followed my blog, if you're among the 6 people who follow my blog, you'll see my mom being one of them, actually. You'll see that I've kind of floated some comments about the things that admin is looking at, and we actually have a brainstorming session tomorrow, the principals and I, and teacher leaders from both campuses and our IB coordinators. And so we're looking at some scenarios in which we could have a blend between entirely online to maybe 1 day a week where students are on campus, or 2 days a week, depending on what the health authorities allow us, to then being able to shift when normalcy returns, whether it's in 6 weeks or 6 months, to then resume what we've become accustomed to. Again, talk about a plan that has to be agile and flexible, because we just don't know. And it would be irresponsible of us to say, you know what, forget it. We're just going to get desperate and open because we want to have our kids back. That we first and foremost are stewards of student and adult safety. Question number 5, I'm skipping over some of the more principle specific ones. Will we resume earlier than normal as the governor announced? What will happen to our summer break? Actually, the governor didn't announce that we're returning earlier than normal. The governor commented that he's having conversations, and I think he said that he'd floated it in his space, as he says. So it's a possibility, but it's not an announcement. An announcement is something is going to happen. The school closures were an announcement. The governor talking about it means that there's conversations, and actually he's not the first to go in the public. Assembly member Shirley Weber has been talking about this. If you look on Voice of San Diego, a month ago already, she was having conversations with the state superintendent of education around the idea of summer school and helping to support students, but in particular our most vulnerable students who can really have a slide backwards over traditional summers. But now we've got this longer modified summer break or time off, and how that looks for our students. So it'll have to be a decision never made in isolation, never made by one person. Also taking into consideration that what the big school districts do have an impact on us, because we know that we have families who have students at Einstein, they may have students at Roosevelt, they may have students at whatever, their local elementary school, they have students in districts in other parts of the county. And so we have to be coordinated and wise in the way that we proceed with these decisions in the future. So if you look carefully at the AEA distance learning plan that we really took a lot of thought in creating, there's some wording in there about, if you look at the assessment piece, the assessment and grading, there's promoted with distinction, then there's promoted, and then there's promoted with more support needed. And the reason for that third category was that we kind of anticipated that there would be students for whom, in order that we could, in good faith and all honesty, say that they had completed their academic requirements for that year and they were ready to and prepared and supported enough to go on to the next grade, they needed extra time. Whether that means that there was a lag in them getting online, which, we still have students. We're ahead of, I'm not going to name names of school districts, but we're way ahead of a lot of folks, but we're not at 100% of our students being online and being actively engaged. So that means that there are kids who, the starting gun went off and there are kids who've already done 5 laps and there's still kids who are putting their sneakers on. So how do we support those? And so that may very well have to be something that happens in the summer. How we afford it, we don't know. What the state budget is going to look like. In mid-May, the governor comes out with his May revise, which will in this year be a complete May rewrite of the January budget recommendations, because the world is completely upside down from what it was in January, in those innocent days when he came out and said, yeah, we'll probably have a 2.6% cost of living allowance in the state budgeting. And we thought, wow, we can make this thing work. Well, all that's changed. So many more questions than answers. But I do think that if we continue to just be patient, work together, keep communication open, and understand that at our end, we're really working every day. I'm trying to get our admin team to take days off, and Kathy and Brad, and they don't listen. We're just on top of this as best we can. So because we care about the kids and the families in our community. So that's kind of what I had at the front end. And I don't know if the principals wanted to address more specifically some of the questions that came in, or I'm seeing some questions popping up here. I haven't had a chance to look at them. So Principal Bowders or Principal Trackus?
Hi there. Go ahead, Andy.
Hi, everybody. Well, I just want to say hello to everybody. And, these are tough times, whether it's at school, whether it's on the street, whether it's at home with my wife and kids, everybody wants very specific answers in a very fluid and uncertain time. And it's very, very difficult. And the one thing that we are committed to in working with our staff, our very committed staffs at both the middle school and, if I could say so, for the elementary, it's things are working for us. And I know that a lot of that has to do with the relationships, the connection that we have, the personalization that we have that takes place here in our school cultures, in our classrooms. And we're very fortunate that, as Dr. Sharetta had said, we were fortunate enough to have prepared before. And I'm not going to say it was a seamless transition, but it was a great transition, one that by our numbers, it looks like about 93% of our kids have been connected, both at the elementary and at the middle school. And there was no gap. We're not changing our protocols in our places 6 and 7 weeks into this, like some of our neighboring school districts, but we're working hard. We meet daily. We look at best practice. We get feedback from the students, feedback from our teachers, feedback from our parents. And we adjusted in the first 2 to 4 weeks to a plan that we're very committed to, and one that we believe that will best serve our students and our families at home. Like Dr. Sharetta said, some of the things that we've been talking about. What does it look like if we have 3 different pathways, traditional pathway, a hybrid, and then for some of our students and for some of our folks that distance learning works for them, what's the opportunity there to be able to develop a possibility of having a distance learning pathway or plan that works for our community, that could be robust. So those are some of the conversations that we're having on our end, some of the work that we're doing.
All right. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the elementary school journey. We spent those first 2 weeks before spring break really getting familiar with the platforms. There were no elementary school teachers one that had a Google Classroom. So those 2 weeks were really familiarizing the teachers with all of the platforms and Loom and Zoom and all of those things that are new to us and new to you. And then spring break happened. And so during that time, leadership really spent time taking what we learned in those first 2 weeks and trying to create a distance learning plan that was going to guide all of our teachers in the weeks ahead. And so the teachers were off on spring break. And I know I had some comments and questions about like, how come they weren't up and running like that day after spring break? And, they needed some time to get back into it. And I think our biggest commitment was making sure that kids were engaged, that computers were given out, and so that there was access and equity. And so that was a lot of time honing that. And we're still honing part of that. And it's the elementary school journey. After spring break, we're kind of in this, like what next phase. We have our classrooms running, but the what next is, how are we getting feedback on what is and what isn't working well? And we have different models. We have asynchronous or different platforms, asynchronous, synchronous. There's the upload of the classroom material and the feedback, and teachers are continuously meeting. And so we've had questions about why can't they just Zoom all day with the kids? And so there's a lot of reasons why. One is they're meeting themselves to try and find best practices within their grade levels. They're meeting with me, they're meeting with special education teachers to kind of making sure we know how to support all of our kids the best ways that we can. And they're taking a lot of time trying to give feedback to students. And so it's still a learning curve. And we would like to be able to, we have a parent survey that's going to be, we're working on right now, just to kind of get feedback from what is working, what isn't working. So we're kind of honing now honing what's working and what we're trying now. The what next is, we are looking down the line, like Andy said, of like, how do we bring our students back safely and give them different learning opportunities? Even within this year, how do we honor our students? We have graduations coming up. And so we want to make sure that we do something. Like, what does that look like right now? We don't know, but it's on our what next list. 5th grade is going to be launching exhibition opportunities. This is their end of their IB journey. And we want to make sure that the kids have an opportunity to share what that looks like. It's going to be much more inquiry based and more individual, but we want to make sure as a staff we're ready to give those kids an opportunity for those experiences as well. There were some questions about, how do I support my child in German? And we understand that is going to be a challenge, but it's not just a challenge for German. It's going to be there, there's going to be students who started behind in math and reading and in their socio-emotional learning, as well as German. So we understand that is a challenge. I know the German teachers are doing what they can to try and support the language development and make things, they tend to have some more, or working on some small group meetings, giving opportunities for morning meetings, having read aloud so that they're at least hearing the language. We understand that's difficult. And we know that when we come back into session, we get to see our kids, we're going to have to assess all of our kids in all of their academic areas and their social emotional learning. Like, I think of our kindergartners who are just learning to be friends and share, right? They're going to be back into our 1st grade classroom and it's going to look a little different, right? They didn't have some of those opportunities. And so, but our teachers are used to that. They're used to assessing kids. They're used to figuring out where they are and what they do, what they need to do to differentiate and plan for them to move forward in all of those areas. And so my message is like, okay, it's okay. Take a breath. Your kids are going to help dictate what they can handle right now, and listen to them and listen to your families, as a family of, we don't want our kids to be anxious and stressed out. And so, we're giving you leeway. And I think we really try to, in the plan, allow for that flexibility, knowing that we're going to have to adjust our learning when we come back. Let's see. Another one of the questions was about getting onto campus. The elementary school is both schools are very restricted on access. And so we are not providing, we've had people, can we open it once a week to get kids in there to get their stuff? And we know kids have stuff there, and we will find a way when it's safe and ready to get their materials back. We can't open for library. I've had that question. We're a district site at elementary school, and the district is really allowing every teacher 1 hour a month in a classroom right now. And so it's not the time for us to be trying to open up the campus. And so we continue to try and hone that and get the supports online. And that's a lot of the time the teachers are trying to give resources online now and spending time just researching that to give you some of those resources that they can't have your hands on right now. And so it's kind of where we are. I tried to wrap in the questions that were ES in that.
I think one of the pieces that sometimes gets lost, or maybe folks don't see, that's been really impressive and humbling, is that behind the technology piece, behind the plans, behind what you see on the internet and what we send out in emails and broadcasts to the community, are really hardworking staff who are going down lists of kids who haven't logged on, going down lists of kids who are not actively engaged, going down lists of parents who have indicated that they don't have technology, but then never followed up to actually come pick up the computer for whatever reason. And we're not judging. We're just trying to get the right tools in the right hands and then make sure that people have the capacity to use them. So every day behind the scenes, those calls, those home visits, those personalized delivery of internet access points and laptops are happening. And that's how we're able to get to a single digit gap of folks who are not yet actively engaged, as opposed to, I know, although I don't think people like to publicize it, but there are a lot of organizations and districts that have, they'll just say, we don't have enough computers. We just don't have enough, or we can't get them out, or our families, we can't even track them all down. We don't have that issue. And that's part of it's our size, but part of it's also that we got on it really early and we have an army of people behind the scenes. It's also very humbling to see that when we float a sign-up list to volunteer to distribute food and other essential items, we tell people we can only have 1 or 2 volunteers at a time, and they have to be more than 6 feet apart. Otherwise, we'd have, again, 20 volunteers a day on our campuses from the staff end. And we have other criteria so that if they have anybody in their homes who are medically fragile, they also can't volunteer. But we put out the sign-up list and it fills up for 2 or 3 months at a time. It fills up in 5 minutes. And that's just a testament to, and I know, that's a testament to our staff. And I also know there are folks from friends and other parents who are clamoring to come volunteer. And so the fact that we've limited that flow is due to no other reason than we have to be committed to keeping people safe. And everybody who comes to the campus is issued an essential worker letter that I sign. So if they get stopped by police or other officials, they'll be able to justify why they're here. And so, this is no joke. Tomorrow, or when is it, Friday in San Diego County now, when we go outdoors, we're all now required to wear masks. Before it was a, kind of a recommendation, but now it's a requirement. And so this thing's still, we need to keep it, pay attention to this. And I'm just really proud to be part of this team working on this. So I'm looking down here and I'm not really seeing, I saw a very nice friendly comment in the Q&A, but I'm not seeing any questions. Maybe I'm not clicking the right box. Is everybody seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, we're not seeing any questions anymore,
Okay.
but we just wanted to reiterate to everybody that if you do have any questions that were not answered by the principals or Dr. Shredda at this time, feel free to type those up. Thank you all so much already for all that information that you've already given us.
I do want to just share too, just talking to teachers, they miss your kids and seeing you guys as a part of our bigger community. I know I do, and so that's the biggest piece of talking to teachers. It's like we miss the kids' faces. We miss being part of the community. And so we look forward to, it's one way or another, getting back to some hybrid probably to start of being part of the bigger community. But they're working hard for your kids and for you. And I mean, everyone, our safety crew, everyone is like, when can we want to see kids again? So we are all, we're missing them.
Ask and you shall receive. So there's some questions for you.
Yeah. I'll take the first one. Greta and Andy.
Okay.
So the question is, thank you for doing this tonight and being so dedicated to our kids. When can we expect to hear from you again? For example, if the governor makes a recommendation for starting school in July, it would be great to hear from you quickly after about the plan for AEA, no pressure. So again, we have a 7-day-a-week, almost 24-hour-a-day monitoring system for news on and announcements. So we monitor the governor at noon. We monitor the San Diego County board supervisors at 2:30, I think it is, every day. And then up until recently, we were also keeping an eye on Washington, D.C., although that seems to have gotten, I'm not sure how consistent that's going to be for a while. And we're trying to look at all those three pieces to really look at the political end, but then we also look at San Diego Unified, what they're doing, the California Charter School Association, what their recommendations are, the California Department of Education, the Centers for Disease Control, the list goes on and on. So we're committed. I think we've shown that if we are going to make a decision, we'll make it, and we'll get the word out in every channel and avenue possible. We also are going to continue to be based on science, and we're going to continue to be based on methodical thinking and planning, so that we're not making knee-jerk decisions and messaging. So you'll hear from us. I guess the answer would be, you'll hear from us as soon as possible after a decision is made, assuming that we have solid, actionable information to pass out. And I encourage everyone, I know social media can be really habit forming in times like this, but there's so much on there that's just speculation. And we've really tried to look, if once we make a decision in the future, whenever that day is, hopefully it's weeks, not months, that will be blasted out to everybody within the community, email, text message, probably a robocall for me when you're getting ready to sit down for dinner. It'll also be on the website under the COVID button. So we've really tried to channel information that way. So I hopefully that answers that. Another question was somewhat related. If we remain at stay-at-home learning, how does a family handle it? As if you have two parents working, has this been discussed? It's been discussed endlessly from March 13th, continues to be being discussed. We have staff members on this call to whom that applies, actually. We have, if you read the distance learning plan, you'll see we mentioned that a lot of our teachers and staff have kids. And so their kids are having to learn at home. The teachers and staff are having to teach from home. And so a lot of moving pieces there. There is no simple solution. But what we are thinking of and discussing, and we'll be doing more brainstorming tomorrow, as Mr. Trek has said, if we look at like 3 different options, one being a complete home learning, and then another being a blended model, and then one being much more traditional, then there may be situations where families that have both parents working at home, and maybe the parents, there could be a scenario in which those parents have to actually go into an office, and in that situation, the parents might say, well, if there's an option, I'd like my kids to participate in the face-to-face learning more than the at home. So again, though, safety will always come first. So I think we'd all agree we'd rather be safe and have a lot of inconveniences than have people's health be at risk for the sake of convenience. So it's, I have a high school junior, and luckily she's pretty self-directed, but we still run into situations where I'm on a Zoom call and then I hear a loud French voice coming from the other room, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? And she's like, Dad, I'm in a French class. I got to do this now. I'm getting graded. So these are tricky things. And for the younger kids, especially where we're asking adults to be present when their kids are online, right? That's an even bigger burden. So we acknowledge that, and we've talked about it endlessly. Mr. Trackus and Ms. Bowders, I don't know if you wanted to.
There's a question about students will be moving on to the next grade.
Yeah.
And I think that's outlined in our DLP, is that students will move on to the next grade. We will be having discussions with our families and our students that we've tried every avenue to get them connected, and they didn't connect. And we'll see what we can do to be able to have those conversations to provide additional supports, possibly in the summer. But for the most part, no students will be held back for this.
Okay, I see a question here about Wednesdays. Is that expected to be a minimum day? Again, the plan is meant to be flexible for families. Teachers are used to having their meetings on Wednesdays. So we wanted to keep that very regular and, routine for our teachers. They have an opportunity on each Wednesday for their teams and their grade levels to meet. But that could look different at your home. You can't, the teachers aren't expected to be online. They'll be meeting, but what you decide and the routine you decide with your family is up to you and what you want to do on that Wednesday. There's a question here about adding more potentially non-immersion pathways. And I know I spoke before about we understand we're going to have to assess our kids, and German's going to be hard for some families to maintain. We have not talked about changing our model. We're still a German immersion school, but there might need to be adjustments made when we come back to the school year and we look at what our kids need. But right now, we haven't discussed changing the model. So there's another question about how is it decided that asynchronous teaching was best for elementary students? I ask because other schools have hours of Zoom teaching. Lots of things went into that. First of all, when you look at families who have multiple children, and especially in the elementary school, it's recommended that a parent be with a child who is under 11 in a Zoom meeting, and parents are working full time. Some parents, both parents, the lack of devices for every student. We needed to make sure that there was synchronous learning for kids to check in with each other, to have those connections. But also, it's not realistic from what we've seen for all families to be able to have all students, especially if you have 2 or 3 kids in the elementary school and teachers are working at 9 o'clock and their Zoom meetings are at 9, or their classrooms are at 9 o'clock. How is a parent supposed to be in 3 places at once, and they're working their job and they have 2 kids in Zoom sessions? And so it's really, we love the idea. And also we think about the teachers and screen time and students in screen time. And I know I've heard of people who are like, my kids are on for 3 or 4 hours, on tech. And it's like, we want to make sure that there's a balance. That's a lot of time, and it depends on the grade level. We're only recommending 1 to 3 hours a day of online learning for kindergarten and first grade. And so trying to arrange everyone's schedule around what's right for parents and kids has been really, really complicated. And so we wanted to just make sure there was opportunities for that, but also opportunities for parents to look at the videos. And I know it's hard. We're still trying to hone it and figure out what's best. But that has been just trying to balance all of those different situations out and our teachers, again, who have some of their own children. And sometimes some of them have more than one child in school that they're trying to teach as well. And so it's been a challenge, and also just a learning opportunity. And hopefully the surveys that we get out will get us some feedback per grade level about what is and what isn't working.
There's a question about anxiety and students feeling anxious in the current situation. And we would like to be able to ask if there's situations where your son or daughter or their students that you may know that may need additional social emotional supports. We have those resources. So I would just ask you that you might be able to contact either myself or Principal Bowders, and we can be able to have that conversation with our school counselors and our school psychologists to be able to provide additional levels for supports in those instances.
And just as an add-on to that comment from Mr. Trackus, we've from the beginning tried to set up, we did set up a number of hot buttons on the website, on the AEA homepage. And one of those has to do with being able to, if you're experiencing challenges, whether they're technology related or they're social emotional, you can call or text that number. It's anonymous to the extent that the people receiving it are not going to share it more broadly than with the staff who would provide support. And we have had calls come in and questions come in that are pretty personal, and people need support. And so we're providing that as best we can in this type of an environment. It's challenging to comfort a child, to let them know that in the end, things will be okay. It's going to take some time. in a child's mind, especially the younger ones, 2 or 3 months is an eternity. To me, 2 or 3 months seems to go by. 2 or 3 decades seems to go by in a flash for me, but that's a commentary on my age. But so we know, and I think it's really important that we all try to project as much calm and reassurance as we can within our community. Those of us who and express how thankful we are that we're able to be together as families and have a community that cares. I have to say, getting back to the food distribution, whenever we had extra food, we'd make a call and a member of Friends would come and pick up the extra food and drive it around to people's houses and drop it off. These kind of things don't just happen in your average community. So I think extending that to our kids and letting them know that they're loved and they're cared for. And we will have a time when they're back with their friends. And we know that Zoom sessions are not the same as hanging out with your friends on the playground. They never will be.
There's a question about fifth grade students and parents in the orientation and transition to middle school, which I think is a great question. Fortunately, we had a series of shadow days where we were able to introduce our fifth graders here and give them a feel for the campus. But in dealing with the specifics, I think it's going to be an opportunity for us to consider possibly a digital presentation, a video presentation, where we can be able to discuss and look at some of the details. I know that that will be a good option for us and for our parents, but also to look at and also share with our community that as far as transitioning some of our students, we've already begun those conversations. For some of our students, we're going to continue those conversations, and we're probably going to look at what would a digital parent university or digital orientation look like in the next few weeks.
So it looks like that addresses the questions here, unless I'm missing something.
I think that's it. That's what we see here. We still have about 15 minutes, and we did have some questions, especially in our last Friends session that we had online with regards to 8th grade and 8th grade graduation. I know that there's quite a few parents that are concerned with that. I think 5th grade as well, of course. I think you talked about that just a little bit, but I think that the graduations and just the end of the year for 5th and 8th grade is something that we're seeing a lot of concern with on some of our Facebook sites as well.
Yeah, I think, and the principals can also weigh in on this. I mean, totally, we understand that. We acknowledge these are challenges, just as they are for the UC system and for universities where people are seniors now, and in whatever congregation it is where you're having a celebration that's a milestone is going to be a challenge. And so part of our brainstorming, and again, I've made reference to this session tomorrow, and part of this will come up, will be to look at some possible options. It could be, there are people who've gotten married on Zoom. Okay, it's probably not as nice as being married in person, but it counts. Is there a possibility of having graduation ceremonies that get pushed back to that there's something virtual now, and then, or by now I mean in June, and then there's a re-engagement at a safer time when the community can be together closer than 6 feet apart. That's also a possibility. So, yeah, we acknowledge that, but we really don't have anything concrete. I know we have a lot of people offering to help plan and come up with different scenarios, but first and foremost, we can't get into a situation where we're violating the guidance of the government health authorities in terms of people congregating. So I saw the U.S. The Air Force Academy graduated, and they had their cadets 6 feet apart on a field. they had a massive field so they could spread everybody out, and they all marched out there and stood on little X's on the grass. Those are people who are taught to march and stand where they need to stand. I don't know if that works so well with kids. We're looking at all these different options. But we do want to acknowledge our milestones that we have within our learning. And we certainly, the only thing I can commit is we will not ignore the milestones. They may not be celebrated the same way, or they may not be celebrated at the time that you anticipated. Just as in all other elements of our life, if you've had international travel plans, hotels booked, and all those pieces, you know that's all just been decimated. But it doesn't mean you're never going to stay in a hotel again. It just means it's not going to be in the short term. So we are considering all those pieces.
Thank you so much. I know we heard a lot about that recently, and
Yep.
yes, our kids are not graduating and going to a university, but for some of us, it's still important, of course. So we want to make
It's
sure
important for everybody.
that.
Yeah. And when you work in education, you live by the cycles of the first day of school, the jitters of the first day of school, which even veteran educators feel them a little bit. Even our principals get a little bit less sleep the night before, and then at the end of the year is celebratory. And so we know that shifted, but we need to find a way to still capture that celebration of the end of the year in some way. So I do think that there are some silver linings that come out of some of it. There have to be, right? When you have a community working hard to stay together, there's some learnings around being more intentional in our communication with each other, planning things more carefully and more tightly. I've never seen a time, Einstein's an amazing community, but I've never seen a time where people are outwardly demonstrating so much care and thought about each other. And so if we can take that and translate that into helping our kids recognize milestones, even in this unprecedented circumstance, we'll do it.
So with another 10 minutes, I think maybe at this point, if that's okay, I'd like to ask Stephanie Grinnan, who's the Friends president of our PTO here, if there's anything maybe that you'd like to add. As with any other session that we have, we usually kind of bring a little bit of Friends into it. Of course, we would have had a really great weekend this weekend, which we had to postpone, unfortunately. But good news is we have new dates coming up then for 2021, and we have not forgotten about that planning. But Stephanie, is there anything that you might like to say about how support is happening from the Friends perspective?
We're trying to work behind the scenes, thinking of ideas that we can support the community. I think that we are working, Jennifer Morrissey and I are working on a gift for the 8th grade class to leave behind, which I think is very important for everybody in the 8th grade to kind of leave their legacy there. So we are putting together a donation match. For every $1 that they raise, we will donate $1 from Friends, up to $3,000, so that we can put some water stations into the middle school and kind of leave that as their legacy. Aside from that, we are postponing the gala until further notice next year. So all of those donations and all of the support that has been sent in so far will just be rolled over until next year. And we were collecting meals from the school that went uneaten and delivering them at the beginning of this whole thing. But I think that was just a little too much for us to handle. So we kind of backed off on that. Other than that, we're trying to see what we can do and come up with ideas. So if anybody has any suggestions, we are all ears.
So we also with Friends did have an online session already. So thank you to those that participated with that. So I'm sure we've been talking about having another Friends meeting as well. So we will certainly get that information out as soon as I have it. There is one other question. I don't know if you all might like to look at that one.
the bottom. I guess I should know how to scroll. Have the schools discussed 100% vaccination of students? No, we are going to follow the guidance of our health authorities. So we'll go forward guided by best practice from Sacramento on down to San Diego County on down to us. So we haven't discussed that.
And there is already, we have the vaccination and immunization laws that are in place right now. And so that does cover, the current vaccination laws. And
Right.
we don't, and I'm not sure if this question's referring to
I think that we're referring to
COVID,
COVID.
which there isn't a vaccine.
There's no vaccine. So
I don't know if that's.
if we had them, we'd be handing them out. So, but yeah, as Principal Bowder says, we'll comply with all applicable vaccination laws, whatever that looks like. And how often will pastries with the principals be scheduled? This was a great session. Thank you.
Did we scare you off? I hope not. I hope that.
So I think we'll engage with friends offline and come up with something that's a reasonable cycle for this. It may be, depending on how things, if nothing really changed, it changes for a while. It may not be necessary to have one, but then if there's some big changes coming, then we can queue one of these up. So hopefully it was helpful for folks.
If I could chime in here for a second, Soren Froelich for the Communications for Friends. Thank you all for doing this. I agree, it was a great session. Thank you to all the parents for sending in questions. And the one, I don't want to say good thing, there's nothing good that comes of this, but one of the remarkable things that's happening right now is that people get very creative and find wonderful new ways of staying in contact, simple solutions to complex problems. So if anybody else in the community says, my company does this, or my family figured that out, let us know if you think this can help the school, if this can help you feel better about being more in touch, about the community being together. Just drop us a note on any of our outlets, and we're all here still working behind the scenes. So thank you.
Great. I think that just about wraps up our hour, right?
I think that's it. We actually have a couple more minutes, but with that, I think as friends, we'd like to also say thank you to the administration for your support also in this time, and also for taking the time to be available for us and be available for everybody else in the community here during this time. And again, we didn't scare you off too much. We'll be happy to host another session with you.
Maybe we can mail out pastries to everybody in advance.
We'll just go door to door and drop them off. How about that?
Thank
or
you.
your best cocktail. So
Yeah, that's
thank
right.
you everybody so much for
Thank you.
joining us. On behalf of Friends, we really thank you for all your support and the community efforts that you've all put out there. And thanks to Dr. Shreda and Principal Bowders and Principal Truckus for joining us.
We miss you all.
And we missed you. You're right.
Right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.